Is that all right if I start? It's cold. Alrighty, I hope everyone had a good break. I want to apologize in advance. I am actually really cold, so I'm able to keep myself from shaking, but my voice, I can't. So just keep that in mind. So the first half, we talked about just the mindset of wealth. So this second half is purely what you should do with, once you've created that budget and you start paying yourself, what you should do with the money you pay yourself with. Um, and I'll go into all the numbers here. So obviously, like I said before, there's people always have the same two reasons for not investing. It's either they invested before, lost all their money from the investment, and so they don't want to go back into any type of investment, or they use the excuse that, oh, I don't have enough money saved for this investment or to invest. I want to have 5,000 in my bank account, and then I'll start investing. That seems like a good number. Then I'll start investing. My suggestion is those are both very bad decisions. You can start investing right now with that. Let's say you're making minimum wage and you have that $63 at the end of the month. I highly suggest you just start with that. Start with whatever you can. You shouldn't wait till you have more because there will always be a reason to spend that $63 that you have at the end of the month. You always come into something that comes along where you're like, oh, I'm going to spend it. So my suggestion is just right away, always invest right off the bat. Whether it's you have an account and you put all the money in that account, and then once a month you go into that account and you start filling it into whatever type of investments that you prefer. That's one option, but I just wouldn't leave it there. So I like to use this little analogy so people kind of understand why you should invest. If you had $100 20 years ago and you put it under your mattress today or pulled it out today, it'd be worth $66. So the depreciation factor of money, that's what you would have. So now if you take into account that banks typically, if you put it into a bank account, most people have bank accounts, so they put their money into a bank account. Well, let's say you did the same exact thing and you just left it in a bank account. And you're like, well, the bank's giving me interest, so I don't have to invest. I can just leave it there. It will make me money over time. Well, if you do the math with both the depreciation of the value of money and how much interest you get, banks typically, the national average is 0.05% on the money in your account. Most big banks that I'm pretty sure all of us typically use give you 0.01. So like if you have Chase or I think there's only a couple banks, like big banks that I can think of. I think Wells Fargo is one of them that does 0.05. So let's just say you have one of the banks that gives you 0.05. You're looking at probably making $10 off $100 in that time, in 1 year. Or no, it's 20 years, yeah. And so if you add it all together, instead of getting $66, you have $76. So yes, you may have made $10 off of that interest, but in the long scheme of things, you did not really make any money. You still lost money. So leaving it in the account that you have saved all your money savings in is not what I would suggest, other than having an emergency fund. That's the only type of money that should just be sitting in your account, is having that emergency fund for anything that comes up that you can access right away. Because if you have a stock account or anything like that, you know it takes several days to get your money. So if you have an emergency and you're like, well, I have a whole investment account that I can pull money out of for this emergency, well, you're going to have to wait a couple days before you can even touch the money. So I would suggest having a separate account that you don't have to use for investing. You just keep for your emergency fund. And then I would not leave your savings in just your bank account to sit there and gather interest, because it's not going to gain you anything in the long run. So like I said, I'm going to give you guys 3 strategies. You guys can stop me at any time and ask questions. These are just overall, in my opinion. I'm not going to, because I am not yet licensed for financial advisor, I'm just going to suggest options that I either do or that I am going to do. So this is just what I personally get into. So at one of these conferences that I attended, a guy talked about how the key to wealth is ownership. And I 100% agree with it. Now, in the beginning, we were talking a lot about mindset and how a lot of these very wealthy people have the same type of mindset. And that mindset sets them apart from people that live paycheck to paycheck. And so that mindset is that what goes along with the mindset is ownership. The way they view stocks, I found at first I thought it was really funny because I was like, it's not really true, but when you really think about it, it is true. So I met with one guy who is very wealthy, and I was like, oh, what do you do for a living? He's like, oh, I own a bunch of companies. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, what companies? He was like, Apple, Amazon. He started listing all these really big companies, and I was like, I could have, if you were Jeff Bezos, I would have known. Like, there's no way you own Amazon. He was like, it's the mindset. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, keep in mind when you buy stocks, you are now part owner. You own shares in that company, which means you get a say in what happens. Obviously, the more shares you own, the more of a voice you have. But you are an owner in that company. You are classified as an owner. So it's not, the mindset you should be having is buying something, having ownership over something. So when you buy stocks, ownership is key. And so there's several different ways you can do it. Specifically for me, I will go either, a long time I did penny stocks, but that has very high risk. So you just got to look at your finances and figure out what's best for you. So penny stocks is one of those things where you need to be sitting down focused for 10 minutes and watch it and be able to be like, okay, if it goes to this number, I'm selling. If it goes to this number, I'm selling. Oftentimes you're going to have a very up and down. Either you're going to make a lot of money in one day or you're going to lose a lot of money in one day. That's not what I would recommend for really anybody. I was just getting into it, and so I thought it would be fun to really focus, have everything happen in 10 minutes. Obviously, if you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money that way. But my recommendation, I would not do penny stocks. The most safest option I would recommend is index funds. It's simply, if you don't know what an index fund is, it's basically investing in the S&P 500. You have $60 and you say, okay, I'm gonna put it in the S&P 500, and it will split up that $60 amongst every single company in the S&P 500. So if one company's having a really bad day, well, that's not gonna affect you as much because you have all the other companies that are doing great, and back and forth. Obviously, there are so many different types of index funds, so I'm not gonna go into all of them, but you can find ones out there that cap your return and also cap your losses. So like one specific one that I invest in, it has a cap on the loss of 0.75. So even when all the stocks are down, if all of them are negative, I'm making 0.75. If all the stocks are above 12%, I only make 12. So it cuts me off there. So, and then if you look at the whole numbers for the past 10 years, it has an average of 8%. So I have been up 8% on everything I've invested in that. So index funds are always a safer option. Obviously, the rate of return is a lot slower, but you're talking about a grand scheme of things where you're trying to have a specific lifestyle where you can focus on things that are your passion. So not have to necessarily stress about anything, but be able to focus on what really matters to you. So again, I would do index funds. That's a good bet. I had something I wanted to I'm blanking on it now. It will come back to me. So whenever I ask people about stocks and you have the people that invest that lose a lot of money and they never want to get back into stocks, you always hear that, like I said before, that one line. My little quote I like to give is, the stock market is a roller coaster ride. It has its ups, it has its downs, and obviously the only people that ever get hurt, when you really think about it, are the people that either did not do research and wanted to get rich really quick, and so they invested in a very risky bet, and it did not pan out, and so they're like, oh, I lost all my money. It was a good bet. They were supposed to do good. That company was supposed to be great. Well, the odds are you're not going to make any money doing it that way, or if you just hop off because you panic. So anybody that jumps off in the middle of the roller coaster ride is going to get hurt. So my suggestion is don't hop off. So unless you're in a situation where you have made, since the moment you invested and the roller coaster ride is going and it's going up and down, but it's gradually going up and you've obviously made some money, but now you're in a tight financial spot. And you're like, I need all the cash I can get. Well, yeah, you can pull out there. You're not jumping off the roller coaster ride and getting hurt, because you rode the ride for a very good long time. But if you just hop off in the middle, you're going to get hurt in that process. So don't jump off in the middle of the ride. Let's see. The strategy I have for number 2 is real estate. Now there's multiple avenues, and I could probably spend 3 days talking about all the different aspects of where to invest when it comes to real estate. But I'm only going to talk about really 2 very simple ones. But does anyone know the main loans that you can apply for when you're buying a house? The 4 main ones. So FHA loans. That's not a main one, but that is a type of loan you could do. He said OPM, which is other people's money. So if you have a very wealthy friend and you go up to them and be like, hey, can I borrow some money? I'll pay you. That is a option, but that's not one of the most common ones. But OPM is a type of, I guess you could say, loan. It's basically just going up to a friend and being like, hey, will you give me $500,000 and I'll either give you interest or give you a percentage of the profit I make. And they're a friend, so they're like, oh, of course, I got you. But not all of us know very wealthy people. So unless you do, then that's a solution. But there's about 4 main ones, and you have the conventional loan. You have FHA, you have VA loans, and you have USDA loans. So each one, you would go to a mortgage lender, and they would provide you would get pre-qualified, and they would eventually, basically say what you can get. But the reason why, so real estate, buying a home is one of the top fears in America. Because when you look at it, what do you think of when you see that?
Real quick, USDA.
It's Kimberly was looking for. It's another type of VA loan. So it's like a veteran. But what do you think of when you see this? Or if like you're, huh? 30-year mortgage. Maintenance and repairs. Neighbors are too close. So it's just the starting point. So the top real estate, buying a home is considered one of the most feared things in America, just for the fact of when you look at it and you see 800,000, you go, I don't have that. I don't have 800,000 in the bank account. I do not want to go 800,000 into debt. These are all things I do not want to do, but I need a place to live. So it's just one of those scary things. And so personally, I would say now that I have gotten into the real estate area, I'd say it's simply because people just don't understand it. You are told that when you go to a mortgage lender, they're like, oh, you can get a VHA loan. You're like, okay. You don't necessarily know. There's about 4 different types of FHA loans, 7 different types of conventional loans. I think I have a whole slide on this. So yeah, you have the 4 different main loans. And then you have 7 different types of conventional loans, 4 different kinds of FHA loans. VA loans offer very many different programs, including 1 direct loan and 3 backed loans. USDA loans offer 3 different loans. So when you get a loan, a lot of the times all you're told is you have one of those. You're not told exactly what you got. So if you have a good agent or if the mortgage lender is your friend, they will help you figure out exactly what you got or what is best for your situation. So if you're told you have an FHA loan, well, most people don't know what the qualifications are for that. They don't know any of the different kinds of loans that there are inside of it. They just know I have an FHA loan, so I can get a property. But with all these different kinds of loans within them, they all have different benefits and they all have different requirements. So if you're looking at flipping a home, well, clearly you're going to want either a conventional or an FHA renovation loan. And it's usually classified under 203K. Obviously, you don't know what any of that means or you're not informed of any of that. So when you're going in and you don't tell your realtor or your mortgage lender, they're just going to give you a very basic generic FHA loan that may not give you all the benefits that a renovation loan would give you. A renovation loan would give you an extra sum of cash to fix up the property, flip it, and sell it, and then you can pay off the loan back. So if you just get a typical FHA loan, well, then you're going to start paying monthly, and you may not have the extra cash to fix up the property. But simply knowing this information, you can be like, look, I want to flip. You can go up to an agent and be like, hey, I want to flip a house. Do you have any suggestions? And they'll be like, okay, let me help you with that. And they'll find houses that they think are best for flipping, and then they'll help you get the specific loan that is best for that process. So example, I had a house in Ceres, which is I think it's 2 hours from here, that was perfect for flipping. I am an agent that does, one of the things I do is REO listings. REO is a term that's foreclosed properties. So foreclosed properties tend to be the best properties for flipping for the fact that the bank is trying to recover whatever losses they can. So most of the time, they don't make their money back, but they do get some of it. And because they want to get some of their money back faster than later, they will sell it for the house a lot less than what it's worth. So I had a property out in Ceres that was $330,000 in a neighborhood where all the houses were about $420,000. So the reason why they go lower is because it's been there has been no one living there for 2 years, so it hasn't been maintained. So you have webs, you have all kinds of stuff like that you're dealing with. It doesn't look pretty right off the bat, but if you fix it up, it will be very pretty and meet the standards of every other house in that neighborhood, because typically a neighborhood is all built around the same time. So they're all built that same year or things like that, so they all have the same features. So if you buy a house that's cheaper in one neighborhood, or cheaper in that neighborhood, and all the other houses are more expensive, that's what I would highly recommend, because the other houses will bring up its value. Whereas if you buy a very expensive house in a neighborhood that has very cheap homes, that expensive house is going to drop in value. So with this house, the guy came in and he bought it right away. Right now it's going through escrow, but he got a FHA renovation loan. And I ran the numbers. I helped him run the numbers on it. Essentially, he's going to be paying $30,000 to fix up the property exactly the way he needs to. So he got the renovation loan. And once it goes through escrow, then he's going to spend the next 6 months fixing it up. So the things that this specific house needs are a new garage door, because it's a little dented, new flooring, to check the roof, and a new HVAC. So those are all things that it needs. And then you might go into a couple wants, just to make it look a little prettier. But after all of that, you're looking at about $30,000 to fix up the house completely, which means he would have spent a total of $360,000. And then he's going to resell it for $420,000. So in a matter of 6 months, he makes a good chunk of change right off the bat. Of course, there's always the fear of what happens if I make a bad investment, or I'll get into tax shelter in a sec, but what happens if I make a bad investment? Or I buy a house and now I can't afford the mortgage, or I lost my job and so now I'm not going to be able to pay for it. So there's several options you can do. Let's say you lost your job and you have enough in your savings to where you have 3 months that you can pay the mortgage on the property. Then after that, you can't pay it anymore. Well, you can just sell the property. You can always just, especially if it's a property that's not your main residency, you're not living there, but it's an investment property. You either have renters or you're flipping it. You can always sell it. So by selling it, if you've gained any equity in the property, well then not only can you pay off the loan, but you'll probably make some money from it. Obviously, it's not going to be as big as if you flipped the house and everything went perfectly, but you'll be able to make some money for it, and you won't be in debt because you'll have paid off the loan. And then you can use whatever you did make towards your next down payment for your next property to try again. And then you have, let's say you lose your job and you don't have any money in savings. Well, you can always do a short sale. Short sales are not the best. They're not always that fun, but typically, essentially, you go up to your mortgage lender or the person that gave you the loan, and you say, hey, I want to do a short sale on the property. Now, it only works if the lender agrees to it, because they will drop whatever you owe in your loan and to the sale of the house. So you don't go into debt, but you don't make any money either, and it only works if the lender is okay with it. So you pay off the loan, it's called a short sale, you sell the house, you pay off the loan, and then you're back at square one again. But if any of these real estate investments pull through, well, you make a good chunk of change that you can use towards your next purchase. But the reason why I have real estate up here is we talked before about tax loopholes. there are a crazy amount of tax benefits to buying either your first home. And a lot of times, you can even find ways to where if it's your second or third home, you can still qualify for first home tax benefits. So the main thing is tax shelter. And I'm going to go into a couple details that way. Let me see. Okay. So tax shelter, I'm going to explain a little bit what that is. Tax laws allow you to shelter a large amount of profit from a tax if certain conditions are met. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you meet certain conditions that allow you to get tax breaks, tax benefits. Let me see. So I'm going to give you a couple. I'm just going to list a couple. There's obviously, you have to qualify for these, or there are other ones that I'm not going to list that you may qualify for, but I'm just going to list them all out for you. You can get tax deductions. Deductions are expenses the IRS has agreed you can subtract from your taxable income so that when you pay your tax bill, you'll pay less. So a lot of first-time home buyers get tax deductions. You can get tax credits. Now, oftentimes whenever I explain this to anybody that's buying a home, they think they're the same thing. Tax deductions and tax credits are the same. They are not. They're two different things. Tax credits are, tax deductions reduce how much taxes you'll pay indirectly by reducing your taxable income. Tax credits reduce your bill directly. They are a dollar amount subtracted from your tax bill itself. So you can get mortgage interest deductions. So if you're, let's see, one of the main tax benefits. This is what most people look forward to when they buy a home, is this specific aspect of it. It allows you to deduct the interest you pay on a mortgage used to buy, build, or improve your main home or second home. So you can deduct that from your taxes, which is pretty useful. You also get a mortgage tax credit. It's issued by the government directly to a homeowner that allows them to reduce their tax bill if a specific bill by a specific percentage of their mortgage interest. So there's multiple different benefits, tax benefits to it. There's just a lot. And I can't really go into all of the specific ones because you have to qualify. It's going to be different for each person. But you get a ton of tax benefits that just make it the government wants you to buy a home. So they push for you to buy because they would much rather you buy than rent. So buying is a better option. And of course, you don't have to live in it. Obviously some loan options require that you live in it. Other loan options allow you to rent it out or flip it. As far as renting goes, renting prices right now are essentially the same as a mortgage, if not more so. So it has gotten to a point now where you can have someone else pay your mortgage for you. So you find a house that's move-in ready or has a couple things that needs fixing, not a flipper, but something that is already really nice that you could see a whole family moving into, whether you choose to do by a college campus where you have college students living in it so you don't have to maintain as much, because if it's college students, the odds are they're not going to want it to be perfect, and they probably are going to think that they broke something over something in the house is not right. So you don't have to worry about maintenance as much. But if you do a single family residence, well, obviously you're going to have to deal with them calling you constantly and wanting every little thing fixed. But of course, you have someone that's probably going to be there for a really long time. Whereas a student may have a 1-year lease and then leave. A family is going to stay there for a really long time. And I think you can have up to 7 years on a leasing contract. At least that's the most I've seen, is a 7-year leasing contract where you know that you have 7 years of monthly payments coming in. And usually it's right around what the cost of mortgage is. And if it's your first property, well, then you can get your property taxes, and you're still paying a mortgage. You can get your property taxes taken away. So you're not even paying that. And then always what I recommend is when you have a property that you are renting out, you don't spend any of the money that you do make from the renters. So let's say the mortgage is $2,000 and they're paying $2,300 of rent each month. Well, okay, you're making your mortgage and then you're having an extra $300 for money you made, profit. I would always suggest you just save that. Because let's say the water heater breaks. Well, instead of dipping into your own savings, You just take the profits from what you had from the house and use it to buy a water heater. Obviously, down the road, if you do this for several years, you can now take a home equity line of credit out and use it as a down payment for your next house. So, which in turn allows you to get more property tax shelter, more deductions on your property. And I've always been asked how that works. Essentially, it's just the bank will give you the money that you have already earned on your previous house. So if the house you bought it at was $400,000 and now it's worth $450,000, the bank will give you that $50,000. Use it as a down payment for your next house. And as you keep going, you end up owning a lot of real estate if you keep on doing this. Obviously, at a certain point, the bank is going to stop you from getting more loans. But by the time you get to that point, you'll probably have a lot of cash flow from the renters, and you'll be able to have enough saved for another down payment to continue the process if you wish to. The downside is that if you don't continue the process, you're then going to get hit. Once you pay off all the properties, you're going to get hit with a huge tax bill because you're no longer able to deduct it because you're paying off a loan, which obviously there's more loopholes to that if you look into the loopholes, but one of the main loopholes is just get another property. So you can always do that and just keep going with the process. I already went over this. Let's see. So the reason why I put real estate up on this is because 90% of millionaires become so through real estate. So it's just one of those options because it just makes more sense and benefits you as you keep going. If you stop in the process, well, then you're going to start paying more money. Whereas if you keep going in the process and start acquiring more properties, eventually you will hit, well, where most millionaires are. And you own what? Let's say you get to a point where you own 4 houses. Well, you're now in that millionaire category because if you sell all of them off, well, all that money is going to bring you into that category. So 90% of millionaires become so through owning real estate. Okay, so number 3, my third suggestion is a Roth IRA. So I've always been asked what's the difference between a IRA, a standard IRA, and a Roth IRA. Roth IRAs, they tax you before you make any money. Basically, they tax you on the money you put into the account, not the money you pull out. So my suggestion, now there are some downsides, there are some plus sides. One of the main downsides is you cannot take out any money you have earned in that account until you are 59 and a half, and it's been in there for 5 years, at least 5 years. So that's the downside. So if you're 20 years old and you make a Roth IRA, you're not going to be able to pull anything out until you're 59 and a half. But you could, you're just more likely to get hit with tax. But essentially, the reason why I put this up here is because you can almost do anything through a Roth IRA. You can put $100 in there, and then you can buy stock with that $100. So then all the money you make through that stock or that index fund that you invested in is tax-free. You're not spending any money on it if you pull it out later.
Does Roth IRA have index options like the one you mentioned where you're locked in being your cash? Or does that have to be like an individual investment through a different company?
That's a great question. I want to say yes, that you can. I will double check and get back to you on that because I would be surprised if I couldn't make that same investment through a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
That specific index fund is with a company and they offer that service. So I'm pretty sure I could, but I don't know. I'm not 100%. So I don't want to say yes and then it not be true. So yeah. Any other questions on? So yeah, so I would just.
It's more of a statement than a question. So one of the things, I invest in a Roth IRA, and one of the things that what made my decision for me was what you mentioned, the fact that they take taxes first, because it's, when you think about it, the value of money over time with inflation is such that what you can buy with $1 today might be less tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So if you pay the tax on the end side, you're basically, getting a bigger bill. Even though you're putting in less and it's kind of like you take the hit now, it will benefit you when you're ready to take it out. Because the tax bill value of the money might be the same percentage, but 3% today is not 3% tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the big things. One of the drawbacks is, if I'm correct, is that you have a limit in the amount you can put in,
Yeah.
right?
That is also true.
And you can only have one, which is, because I talked to a financial advisor and I was like, can I just open a bunch, because you put this limit on it, because I look at it as a person who's just trying to save, that this is more like a savings account.
Yeah.
You're allowed to like sort of invest through. And the fact that you're capped yearly is a thing, but like, yeah.
It's the reason why I put it up here is just because it's one of those things that you create now and you slowly work on building, and then by the time you retire, you have money there. That's tax-free. Because let's say, put $1,000 into it, that's taxed, okay? Well, at least you're not getting taxed on the $100,000 that you pull out, or whatever the cap is on your Roth IRA. But I would much rather be taxed 10% on $1,000 than 10% on $100,000. So you just gotta, there's pros and cons to it, but essentially it's just one of those things that you can really help better set you up financially for when you want to retire. Roth IRA. I think it's just standard IRA.
Okay, sorry. My question was, what was the one that gets taxed later on? And you said standard IRA.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Like
you.
typical, it's like an investment. When you like buy stock, whenever you pull it out, they tax you on it. So this just prevents that. You basically are paying taxes on this beforehand, and then you get to keep all the money that you invested in. So one of the big things, this next point, I'm probably going to talk about for a little bit longer than most. Does anyone here know the Rule of 72? Has anyone here ever heard of that rule? So, did you have a question? So it's basically talking about compound interest. And so I have this quote here. This is, Albert Einstein said this. He said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. So, let me see. I'll explain a little bit of what compound interest is. And he claims to be the creator of, I would not doubt he is, but he claims to be the creator of Rule 72, which I'll explain a little bit, is if you deposit $1,000 in an account that pays 1% annual interest, you earn $10 in interest after a year. Thanks to compound interest, in year 2, you would earn 1% on $1,010. So that's how compound interest works. The Rule of 72 is basically 72 divided by the interest rate equals the number of years it will take for you to double your money. So obviously, the higher, or I think it's the higher the interest rate, the less accurate it is, because I think it starts getting a little bit not as accurate. But when you start off and you're just saying, okay, if I have 8% and you do all the math for it, 72 is that number that tells you how many years it will take you to double your money. So if you put $100,000 in a bank account, it will take 72 years for your money to become $200,000, since the bank only offers 1% interest. So let's say you get a little wise and you put $100,000 in a time deposit account. It will take 18 years in order for your money to become $200,000, because you divided 4 through 18. Basically, the higher the interest rate, the less number of years your money will take for your money to double.
So what's the calculation?
It's
What's the calculation?
So 72 divided by interest rate, or interest return rate, yeah, equals number of years it will take for you to double your money. So 72, yeah. So if you put 100,000 in an instrument, it would give you a 12% rate of return. It will take only 6 years for your money to double. So obviously, like I said, the calculations get a little off once you get higher on the interest rate, but I don't think anything out there is offering you like 50% interest rate. So I don't think you have to worry about it too much, but understanding compound interest can really help you in the long run of doubling your money and understanding that how much money you will have if you were to invest $150 a month and save that in something that would give you compound interest, and how you could put, I think the numbers were if you're in your 20s or if you're 18 and you start saving $50 at the end of every month, you would have $1 million by 65. Whereas if you did the same thing at your 30s, you would have to almost triple the amount of money you save every month. If you do it in your 40s, you have to put like 500 in every month in order to hit the same number that someone that was only putting $50 in, but they just started earlier. So compound interest can be like a big help if you fully understand it and take advantage of it. Is there any questions on any of that?
How do you find the high interest rate?
It depends on what you invest in. So if you do, like example I talked about earlier, you can invest in an index fund. And so index funds will usually tell you how much you're going to get back, depending. So they're like, oh, if you invest in this index fund, we put your money into real estate, we put it into this, and you'll get an 8% return. So then you can see how much your money could get. And they usually give you, a lot of index funds won't cap off your losses. So if everything that you invested, if it's 500 companies in that index fund and they all do bad, they're not going to cap your losses. They're just going to let you keep going down with it. But most of those won't cap your profits either. So if it goes up really high, then you go up with it. And then usually you get they usually tell you that like in the past 10 years, on average, it's been 8%. Everyone that's invested 10 years ago and left their money till now have made 8% on it. So it goes back and forth. Or you can find specific companies that will cap your profits and cap your losses. So like when you had COVID happen and everything crashed, the people that had those caps and losses were making 0.75%. They weren't going negative. So they were still making money. And then when it went way through the roof and it went back up, well, they had capped at 12% for their profits. So it balanced out to about 8%. So typically with most indexes, it's about 8%, I would say. If you're looking for an average range, I would say it's 8. Oh, if you want to find them, you could really just, honestly, you could Google index funds to invest in, and you can find a whole list of all the different ones, and you can do it through, a lot of banks offer, like, I think Chase has one where if you have a Chase account, you can also set up a Chase investing account, and you can invest through Chase. You can do Fidelity. That's a great one. There's a lot of options, but essentially it's just starting an account, and a lot of them don't require any payments beforehand. Some of them do. They're like, oh, it costs $10 a year to use our services to invest in this index fund. But some of them don't. So it's just finding what works best for you and what you want to invest in. Typically, I like to invest in something that I actually enjoy reading about, because if I don't enjoy reading about it, then I'm not going to keep up with it. So, and I won't better understand the market. So it's also just a learning experience to be able to invest in something you like. So whenever I suggest stocks to anybody, I always ask for a whole list of their favorite hobbies or things they like to do, and then I'll pick companies based off of what they like to do. That way, if like you're really into cars and I suggest Ford, you're gonna like reading about that. You're not gonna not be like, I don't care about this, and you're not gonna skip it. You're gonna actually want to read it because you like that information. So. Any more questions? Because that's all I had as far as the investment strategies was those 3. Yeah, it was Roth IRA. The reason why I put this one at the end is because you can set this up and you can buy real estate through it, you can buy stocks through it. So, and it's just a good way to set up for retirement.
So, stock investing or index investing, anything like that, it can sound really intimidating as a starting point. So I think my question would be is, how did you start making your money grow when you first started, like in high school? What were some of the things that you were doing?
Well, hypothetically speaking, I did not invest in high school because I was not old enough. So hypothetically speaking, we will say that this is all hypothetical. So hypothetically, like I said before, for whatever reason, I just loved Tesla. I thought it was so cool having an electric car. So, and I loved reading about it. So I was like, you know what, I would love to buy Tesla stock. So it was simply just the love of having, or the love of one business, or just the liking of it, or that hobby. Obviously, I also like basketball. I'd love to invest in a team or whatnot, but that's a little bit more complicated. I can't just, so, so at the time it was just, I really liked Tesla. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to invest. I'm going to put some money in it. That way, when anything happens, I can maybe get a little bit more excited or a little bit more sad if wherever it starts going, and see what happens with it. So for me, it was, again, it's ownership. So I can say I own Tesla, having that mindset, even though I'm not Elon Musk, but I can say I'm an owner. And it's, at least the way I do it is I tend not to even look at what the stock numbers are. I just read about it because I'm just fascinated with it. So I've had whatever I bought in Tesla back in high school, I still have that, and I have not looked at it. So I just know the basics of that it's gone up, then it was split. They split the stock. If no one understands what that is, it's essentially like if it goes up to 800 and they split the stock, it will into two, then yeah, you have two shares instead of one share at 800, you have two for 400 apiece. So they split it from, I think it went to 800 and they split it down back to 200, and then it went back to 800, they split it again. So it was simply just the love of a company that just got me into it. So it's just picking what you find interesting, because if you pick something that isn't interesting, you're not going to have any fun, and you're only going to be focused on the numbers, and the numbers can be sad at times, or like when the market's bad, like right now, you're just like, and you just don't want to invest anymore. So finding something that's actually interests you is a good way to keep you from jumping off the middle of the roller coaster while it's going through its down period. But if you look obviously at the trend, if you invested in the S&P 500 index before COVID, and I think it was if you put $1,000 into it, you would have made like 5,000 going up. I can't remember the exact numbers, but you just keep it for the long run. So you just hold on to it and you just ride the waves as they come.
Jed said hypothetically, but what he's not sharing with you is that he talked his papa into buying the Tesla stock for him. Amazing. Yeah, so he gave Papa some money, and Papa bought the Tesla stock in Jed's name, and then when Jed was 18, Papa turned it back over to Jed. Reluctantly.
So, but when it comes to stocks, that is a strategy. You can pick companies that you find interesting. That way you're not so like worried about if they go up, if they go down, or things like that. You're just more curious about like, oh, wow, if information about this comes out, it affects my stock. I wonder why. And you just look into it. The other strategies, like I did before, were penny stocks. That one is a lot more risky, but it can be fun. So if like you're looking for something that like really is up and down, penny stocks is the way to go. Of course, the way I learned to do penny stocks was if you buy a penny stock, if you spend $1,000 on a 10-cent stock, if it hits 15 cents, you sell instantly. You do not wait for it to keep going because it's a penny stock. So you have a cap on each end. So if you bought it all at 10 cents, if it hits 5 cents, you sell. It's a penny stock. So if it's going down, it's going down. So you have a cap. And within 10 minutes, it will fluctuate within that range. So you just got to watch it for 10 minutes and hope that you pick the right penny stock. Of course, when I was doing it at the time, I did as much research as I could, but I didn't really know what I was looking at. So I'm not going to say I was as profitable as I wished I was. But penny stocks are like if you decide that, you would love to spend 2 hours every day doing stocks, you can obviously do day trading, but penny stocks is a good way to have it. Either you make a lot more or you lose a lot more. But yeah. So there's pros and cons, obviously. It's just the risk factor. You need to just look at your finances and figure out what's worth the risk and what isn't. Obviously, no matter what investment you do, there's always a risk. But when it's if you have a budget and you stick to it, that risk isn't going to affect you to the point where you're just out of money completely and you're not able to pay your bills because you're strictly sticking to the money that you pay yourself with and you reward yourself with at the end of every month. So
I'm really glad that you tied it back to budget, because the question I had was what you're describing is a strategy, right? And money is very emotional, especially if you don't have it to lose. The risk you're talking about is like you have to have a real sense that this is money that I budgeted to potentially lose.
yeah,
You should be very clear about that,
Yeah.
right? And then what you're saying is the cap, like if you're selling at, it goes up 5%, right, or whatever it was. Don't get emotionally tied
or greedy,
to, yeah,
thinking
or
that it's going to
greed.
keep going.
It's fear and greed, right? Is what they talk about, and that will take over, and it's surprising how people will do actions that they didn't plan on doing once they see the number and the money. And I think your idea is if you're in it for the long haul and you're de-risking your decision to go into index funds because they kind of just ride the momentum, and but don't look at it, right? Because
Looking at it's going to make you want to back out when you start losing, like, oh, I've lost too much, I don't want to lose anymore, and then you hop off.
or not take profit,
Yeah,
right? Like you're like, oh, what? It made all this money. It's going to make money tomorrow, and then and it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very emotional. So I guess what I was coming to is strategy, right? You kind of have to go in saying this is budgeted. You also have a plan. Like you're not just putting it. It's good that you're like, I like Tesla, so I'm gonna buy Tesla. But the money, it's like Elon Musk, is gonna be okay if you sell your stock, right? It's whether ultimately you are doing this so that you can have that lifestyle you're talking about, right? So have the plan that I'm either just going to let this go for the longer haul and that's what I'm doing with it, or once it reaches a certain percentage, then I'm going to sell and I'm going to stick to my strategy. I guess my question is, when you're just starting out, the stock market it's just like doctors or lawyers, they have like their own language. And it's done that way, I think, to make you sort of intimidated. Like basically you have to go to the banks, go to the investment houses, go to financial advisors to sort of demystify what these words mean, right? Or take the time and learn. And people don't have the time, and and then they're like, I don't even know if I have the money. So it's intimidating, and people feel out of their depth, and it's money, right? Even if you budget it, it's money that you could potentially lose.
it's the hard-earned money that you
Exactly.
worked
So
yourself for. Yeah.
what kind of advice how would you get started? Right? How would you get started if you didn't know anything, or you knew a little bit, and you wanted to come up with a strategy, you wanted to know sort of what was, where do you go to get advice, or how do you get started like that?
When I first was getting started, it was a lot of YouTube. It was just looking up other famous investors that did it. And a lot of them had some similar ideas, and they always set a bar. If you're doing day trading, this specifically, they always set a bar on each end. So they had the price at where they bought it, and they had a cap on each end. They said if it got to this point down here, I am selling. I'm not going to let it keep going down. And even if it gets here and goes up, I already sold at this point. So they stick to that strategy. If it hits this part up here where I've made some money, I'm not going to be like, ooh, it could make more. I am selling at that point. And that's how they typically, and then when you start out, obviously there's a lot of trial and error. So when I was doing it, there were a lot of times where I did lose a good amount of money, but I also learned a lot in that process. I started noticing trends with the market. And the best strategy is just, it's like when you start any type of business. You know, you have Henry Ford, who started 7 businesses before he created Ford Motor Companies. So it's like there's going to be a lot of failure. And obviously, all of those 7 businesses failed miserably. And now he has a business that is now standing the test of time and is here today. So it's only through those trial and errors where you're really going to learn the most. But I would say a basic rule of thumb is, I think my grandpa used to always put his thumb up to the computer screen, and he would have the money here where he bought it. He'd put his thumb up and be like, okay, if it gets here, I sell. And then he put his thumb down on the other, and he goes, it's here, I sell. So you could do that too, but that was always a good rule of thumb, especially if you're trading a lot. If you are one of those people that will constantly check the numbers of how much you're making or losing, and you find that it will stress you a lot, I would do the index fund. Because you don't need, some of them you don't need a certain amount. There are index funds where it's like, oh, you need at least 1,000 to invest in this index funds. And there are others where you don't need a certain amount. So if you're just starting out, an index fund is great because it is just doing a whole bunch of companies in one. So it's not necessarily if the company does bad or good. It's if all of them do bad, then you're going to do bad. Which obviously every day, even if the market is up, there are companies that still do bad. So it's a lot safer. Obviously, you don't make as much money as you would in day trading, but at least the goal for what I was trying to get across was you're looking for you're doing this for your future self, so you don't have to worry. That you can do what you want when you want, what you're passionate about, what your focus is, and not have to worry about what's in the bank account in order to do it. So you can be able to afford your mortgage and all your bills, and then never have to check your bank account for those things. You know that you will have the money for it, and then you can put money, time, effort into all the things that you are really passionate about. But you can only do that if you have a clear mind, and most of the 64% of Americans don't have that clear mind. They're constantly stressing if they're going to have enough. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So, but again, like you said, I would highly suggest you stick to the budget and not ever pull money that's going to take away from your bills, from anything like that. So once you have that budget and you start paying yourself, obviously, yes, it's your hard-earned money that you paid yourself with, that you rewarded yourself with, and you don't really want to lose it, which is why there's safer risks to take. But you're not going to get that financial freedom that's the goal so that you can focus on your purpose if you don't take some risks. So you have to be willing to take some in order to get to the point where you're able to work on what you truly love or enjoy. So personally, I don't necessarily love having to do all the research it takes to understand stocks, but I do know if I do understand it and I do make money from it, I can now transition into something I really do care about. So I put in the work and the time to fully understand it. That way I can get to a point where I don't have to even look at it. I don't have to focus on it. I don't have to watch it and try and buy and sell. I'm currently at a point where I put money in and I leave it. And I don't have to focus on anything else. Obviously, different strategies are meant for different people. Some people really like the numbers part of it, and they like to watch it go up and down, and it doesn't bother them as much. They look at that. And if you do that, then yeah, investing in a single company is great. And obviously, you're going to have a lot more ups and downs in that process. But if you're really worried about losing that money, or if you're at a point in your life where you're just like, I don't have the time to rebuild everything that I have. Obviously, I want to make more money so that I can retire at this age and be able to live the life I want. So I don't want to risk it. I need something safer. Well, there are a lot of safe options out there. Safer, I'm not going to say they're safe, but they're safer. And they can help you get to a point that you want to be at. Any other questions?
Are you going to offer your services when you become a financial advisor?
I will gladly offer all of my services.
Sit with someone, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't want to do the homework index, and well, what index should I?
Yeah, so like I have a lot of that information. It's just also I wanted to give a very general view because on each of these strategies, I could probably spend like on stocks alone, I could have a whole 3-day seminar on all the different things you can do. And obviously, some are a lot more risky, some are way less risky. But in general, you can always, at least for stocks, you can, if you don't know anything and you don't have the time to do research, you can put it in an index fund. That is, in my recommendation, that is something that doesn't take a lot of, you don't need a lot of knowledge for. You can be like, okay, well, you know, I always hear real estate does well. I'd like to invest in something like that, but I don't want to buy a house or anything. Well, there are index funds that will allow you to invest in real estate firms and companies and things like that. So
So in 2 weeks, you're basically, your calendar will be full.
yeah, so
I have a, oh, go ahead.
Just a nomenclature question. Index funds sound the same as mutual funds. Is that just an update on what they used to call mutual funds?
I don't actually, that's a good question. I have never really looked at mutual funds.
Well, it sounds like
They are two separate.
oh, they are two separate.
Index funding and there's mutual funds, and I know that
Okay.
there's differences between the two, I just can't.
They're like just small differences, or are they like some big differences?
Okay, because it sounds like the same outcome.
Like concept?
Yeah, sprinkling it around an X amount of different companies that go up and down, but you still come out ahead.
But mutual funds they may not just do, so index funds, I mean, I think the name index is really because you're following like the S&P.
The Dow, NASDAQ.
You're following the NASDAQ. These are the different exchanges that you can buy and sell stocks. So it's just companies. And the different funds, you might have like the best performing or the biggest stocks, which are like Apple and Google and so on. And they're weighted. You'll get like 10 of those. And it's an index fund, but it's just companies. And with a mutual fund, it is like, it's a bag of different types of investing. So yes, you're right, Johnny, like, it's stocks, but then it's also like domestic stocks, like only for in one fund, they'll pack in, stocks that are part of the US, then stocks that are part of other countries, like domestic versus international, and then real estate. And
Yep.
they will invest in 401ks. So like when people are working and they put money towards a 401k, that in itself can be invested in.
That's another thing that can have its own whole topic is 401ks. A lot of people have a 401k that has tons of money sitting in it that they just leave sitting there. And that's a bunch of money that you can invest, that you can take and you can invest and multiply it. So that's a whole nother route. Obviously, for someone like me that's only worked a W-2 job for a couple years, my 401k isn't as big. But for a lot of people who, let's say, worked throughout their 20s and have a whole 401k, that money just sits there until you retire. Or you can invest it and do something with it, which is a whole nother route. But that's another suggestion if you have a whole 401k.
But essentially, your question, Johnny, is like, is this just a different way of saying the same thing? It kind of is, because you go to the bank and they will have you invest in an index fund, or invest in mutual funds, and they have their own little rules about it. But it's like packaged investing, and you just like choose one, and it has all this stuff in it. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing that you were talking about with Tesla, because ideally you should look for the funds that reflect your values. So if there's some that have like defense and military stuff in it, and then you may not want to be a part of that, or you may want to be a part of it. Or there's a lot now that have social good as an aspect of it.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, and so just like an index fund, you find one that like you were just saying, it's like there's some that have a cap and some that have a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some that just let you go up and down in
Yeah.
the market. And there's all these different products, as Deborah was saying, right? Mutual funds, same thing. It's like, oh, like one that I know of is like US Ag is what its call sign is, and it's like agricultural commodities in the US. So like it'll invest in how many orange produce is bought and sold in a day. So that's not stocks, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a mixed bag of other things, and you just look at it. It'll send you the prospectus. You go through it. You read. It's like the thick book, but you read through it and you see like, do I want to invest in this? Or you can ask for it for free, and a lot of it's just posted on the internet.
Awesome. Okay, so my question was going to be for somebody just starting out and they want to actually have this mindset that's like different about money and for whatever their motivation is, but it's intimidating and it's a lot of information. For someone just starting out, what are like 3 recommendations you would make?
For stocks?
No, for your financial management in your life. You want your money to start building and growing, but you're just starting, and you work 45 hours a week, you have stuff you do, and you just don't. So what I'm trying to say is, this is your life. You have this gift and this calling. And so you're spending all of your working hours on this. But for other people who we can't invest mentally in our time at that level, what would be 3 like practical things we should be doing in our life that aren't going to require a lot of study or a lot of like long-term investment? Maybe initially, because we have to make some changes in our lives, but they're just 3 really good, healthy financial principles to follow for the average person that has a different kind of a job than money.
I think one of the biggest things would be make sure you distinguish between wants and needs. There's a big difference between needs and wants. So for me, I make sure I hit all of my needs, and I rarely ever spend any money on my wants. Just because over time, I think it's 21 days to create a habit, 90 days to create a lifestyle. So one of the things I've been doing, and I think my dad joined me a little bit, was I do this little 90-day challenge where the type of person I want to be, or the best version of myself, I try to be that for 90 days straight. So the person that gets up at a specific time with no excuse, the person that reads this amount every day, I just follow it to a T for 90 days straight. Because, yeah, you can do it for 21 days and you create a habit, but I want a lifestyle of it. I want to naturally want to do it. And so, like, I think most people can agree that if you wake up at a certain time every day, naturally your body's going to have a natural alarm clock where you're just naturally going to get up. Even if you don't have to, if you have been working in a job where you wake up at 5 a.m. every single day for 10 years, eventually when you don't have to get up at 5 a.m. every single day, your body's just naturally going to be awake at that time because it's so used to it. So one of the things I do is just a 90-day challenge where I think of the person I want to be, and then I try to do that every single day with no excuse. So that goes along with finances, is I don't buy anything I want necessarily. It's all things I need. If a shirt rips, then I get a new shirt. If pants rip, I get a new pants. Does that answer your question? So yeah, it's just making sure you know the difference between wants and needs and focusing on the needs. And then once you get going and you start having a good amount in your savings, I had someone brought up a very good point to me when I got my car, because it was the first car I bought myself. And he was like, why would you spend that much money on a car when you could have just taken that money and bought stocks with it and then used the profits from the stocks to then buy the car? You'd have the same amount of money and a car. I was like, that's a really good idea. I should have done that at the time. But it's yeah. So it's distinguishing wants and needs. If I was distinguishing my wants and needs, obviously I did all the math for the car I got, and it made more sense at the time. But if I didn't actually need a car, like if I could have gotten around driving or busing everywhere, I would have just taken the money I would have spent on a car, invested it, and then when I got to a point when I needed a car, taking the profits from the investment, not the actual money I used to invest to get the car.
So you paid in cash, because a lot of people do loans for cars.
Oh no, I did not pay in cash. I needed to build credit.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
Because you can't take out a loan for a stock, right?
oh no, it was just,
Like he could have taken his car payment. Like if his car payment was gonna be
Okay,
that,
that makes sense.
then
Okay.
he could have just saved that till he actually needed that.
because I needed a car right away, it was just use what's the cheapest car that will get me from point A to point B. And I have no regrets on obviously, but it's also because it's one of my dream cars to have, but it gets me to point A to point B, and I have now reached the point where I have broke even on that investment. So now everything from here on out is profit or money I am saving from if I would have gotten any other car. So
Yeah, another thing he did is for his payment for his cars, he doubled the payment.
yeah, that's
So that he didn't want to just pay the minimum. He wanted to pay principal so that he'd get that paid
Yeah.
off quicker.
That's another big thing is I know I talked about credit cards earlier, but when it comes to any type of loan or anything you take out, paying extra is always a good route to take because you pay your interest first. So when you get a car, they make you pay the interest part first. So if you pay extra every month, well, instead of paying a total of $25,000 for a car, if the car was $20,000, you'll probably end up by the end of your years of paying that car off, you'll probably end up spending $25,000. Whereas if you pay it off a lot sooner, you can build credit, and you can pay probably $22,000. So you pay less and you also build credit. So that's why I chose to take out a loan, was just because I needed credit. Because unless you're Bill Gates, I think it's most billionaires don't have awful credit scores. Well, they don't really need good credit, but good credit can be very beneficial for a lot of things. So that's why it's good not to go in credit card debt. It's just making sure you budget your money wisely and then not spending what you have a limit to spend, which is $5,000 or whatever your credit card says, but spending what your budget says, and then making sure you pay it on time. That builds your credit, and then you don't pay as much as interest if you pay more than what you owe. So I do that for my car every month. I think it was double. So, yeah, any other?
I think I would just add one last piece to this that is a takeaway for me, is I found anything that I'm trying to do in life, if I can get around a community that has the same mindset, it vastly improves my motivation to make the sacrifices that I need to make to arrive at that. Because I'm having conversations with other people who also maybe ascribe to minimalism or saving, and so I don't feel like I'm making like the sacrifices alone. And I noticed that with Jed. I mean, a lot of the people he was hanging around, like his papa, were people who were in this mindset, and so it's easier to adopt that kind of lifestyle. And then his friends, he's talking about it with his friends, and they're asking him questions. So you get into a community and not just that individual mindset of doing it, and it doesn't make the uphill climb so tough.
Yeah, they all invest in, or most of them invest in stocks. So that's a topic of conversation that comes up, like what they invest in or what they did, how much money they made on the stuff they invested in or anything like that. Only a couple of them haven't made some money in stocks. That's because they even recognized that it was not a smart investment, but they just thought, why not? But yeah, so having. That's funny. I went into that I tried to learn as much as I could about that. And for me, it was just like any type of cryptocurrency. I was just like, when you buy stocks, you're betting or you're paying for a share of a company, and you're betting that that company is going to do good. If you buy Bitcoin, the only thing you're betting on is other people to buy it. If no one else buys it, it's not going up. If people just start selling it, it's going down. You're not investing anything, like in anything. You're just buying a digital currency. So I was like, how do I know if in 5 years everyone's going to love Bitcoin? What if everyone hates it? Like, at least when you buy a stock, you have information. You can look at all the people working at the company. You can look at their mission. You can look at all the work they put in. You can kind of decide for yourself if it's a good investment or not, especially when you're just doing a single business. But cryptocurrency, I got into it for a little bit because it was just like a huge wave, and so I was trying to figure it out. And I looked into digital real estate too. I looked into that, and then NFTs were another one. And I was just like, I'm just going to stick to the stuff I already know really well, or the things I've already studied. I don't need to go into a whole nother stream over there. But yeah, so I mean, if you're more passionate about cryptocurrency or digital real estate or NFTs, and you think that you'll love learning about that more, go that route, because you'll be more interested in it than anything else. And so there are some cryptocurrencies. The only ones I was ever interested in were the cryptocurrencies that were created for games. So that way, if the game did good, the cryptocurrency is going to go up. So I was like, okay, well, I can put money in that. I'm betting on the gaming company to make a good game. But those are the only cryptocurrencies I ever invested in. And then I was like, I don't like this that much. It's not as interesting to me. So then I pulled out of that. So yeah. It really is just trial and error.
And I would say, yeah, like, do a little bit. Like, you don't have to jump
Yeah.
both feet, right? You can just dip a toe.
And the thing is, the earlier you start, like just the earlier you start on the process, even when it's just dipping a toe, like I said, if you're 18, it's $50 a month. And if you just saved that, you would have enough to live comfortably when you retire. The longer you wait, the more that number increases, or the bigger risk you have to take to make the money that you need to. So it's just, don't wait. It's just getting going right now. There's no reason to not invest on anything you're saving.
Awesome. Mic drop. You can hit the button right there. I just want to say thank you to Jed for today. Yeah, it was great. It was really, really, really good. You did great. Yeah. Wow. Keep it on? Oh, okay. He wants you to redo some things. I know that Jed was recording for his own personal stuff here, so he was saying some things. And I'm just going to say this off the record, so you can cut me out, right? Yeah, you can cut. All right. I'm going to say some things off of the record from, first, I do appreciate his hard work, and he's always been one to tackle his fears. So whether it was fear of heights and hiking Half Dome, or fear of public speaking, so he's kind of overcome, worked his way through that, and has just done really well. But he called me the other day, sent me a text the other day that was just really touching, just about, and this didn't come through here because a lot of what was going on, but just his own personal passion, which I was trying to get at there with my question, his own personal passion to build God's kingdom. And where he sees that at work in the world. And the other day he took a whole day to just get down to the heart of things for himself. Like I'm not pushed away from his work, his real estate, everything, and just really, really, really had some personal time, with God, and tried to get to what God was calling him to do. And I appreciate that about him. And I think it's really important for all of us to identify for ourselves what, am I being true? Because we can get distracted and get off course. Which brings me to this point, as it relates to the church community, as it relates to a church community, the first thing that I always do, and I'm just going to take 1 minute and say this and then be done. But the first thing that I always do when my paycheck comes in is I take the first 10% and I give that away. I feel like the life that I have been given is a gift. My job is a gift. The money that comes in is a gift. And yeah, I work for it, but I work for it with someone else's air. I don't own this air, it's a gift. And that heart of generosity, that heart of gratitude creates generosity. Like, I want to be generous with that. And so immediately taking 10%. And what I used to do is I used to take the 10% and I would give it to, ministries or things that like in the case of Lighthouse, giving it to Lighthouse, and making sure it was going towards ministries that were. But this past year I started doing something different, and it has radically kind of. I was looking back at Abraham kind of starting this trend of. I don't know how to articulate this, but he gives 10% to Melchizedek. Melchizedek doesn't need it. Melchizedek is not in a needy position. So it's not charity. It's honor. And I started asking myself, when I give, am I giving in a sense of charity? Or am I giving, I think, and part of me does. I do give, I'm with Jed, I give to Karuna Care, and I give to other organizations. I am charitable. But there's also part of it that I want to be honorable. I want to give to a place where this is me honoring, like from a posture of honoring God, honoring the goodness that has been given to me in my life. And so, and I'm going to tell you, I started doing that with someone that I look up to spiritually. I just said, I'm going to give a portion of that to someone out of honor. I already give charitably. And I'm just going to see what happens. I'm telling you, from the moment that I started doing that, my life has, in every area of my gifting, it has gone off the charts. And I just started doing this about 2 months ago. And I'm like absolutely blown away. And I had never taken into consideration giving to honor. It was just always give to charity. And so, to our Lighthouse crew, I just throw that in there for consideration, because in terms of like my writing, all the things that I feel God has called and gifted me to do, those doors have flung wide open. With this book project, and I'm having a hard time catching my breath with how fast it's coming. And it comes back to that moment when I felt like God said, you have given charitably, and that's beautiful. Find something to give in honor to. And so, anyway, just thought I would share that. And that's kind of tithe and offering and all that stuff. Because the truth of the matter is, you can't. We have 4 circuits in our brain, 4 circuit centers in our brain. And one of those circuit centers is just about generosity. And that part of your brain will not fire off circuitry when you're not being generous. But the moment you're being generous, it opens up a whole nother fourth of your brain to go to work. Isn't that crazy? It's a Harvard study that just came out a couple of, like this month. So you guys are all on like inside info that I had just researched this week. All right, cool. Jed, I think you're going to do some more recording. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And to the lovely table over